Hello, this is Jack. The video you are about to watch is not one that I fully agree with. However, it was a video that was posted as a response to a contest I presented a few weeks ago, and along with another video to be featured next week, was decided to be the winner because of the thoughtfulness and perspective that went into its presentation, and I hope that you can appreciate the video in this way as I have. The content in the information box below is taken directly from Zarkov's video. So without further ado, I present Zarkov45's video, Thunderfoot, Science, and Religion.
TogetherForPeace has offered an HD camera as a prize for the best hit job on Thunderfoot's video, Why Do People Laugh at Creationists, Part 36. So let's get started.
He's got a method of validating the Bible.
I'm arguing that the Bible contains scientific insights that have been known for 3,000 years, revealed in the pages of Scripture that man did not discover until modern times, thereby lending credibility to the author's claims to divine inspiration.
Here is Thunderfoot's first lapse in critical judgment. What Venom Fang X has just said is demonstrably false, and Thunderfoot didn't explain why. I can show you dozens of religions that had access to the kinds of scientific facts Venom only pretends he is talking about, but it won't give those religions any credibility at all. Just Google ethobotany and ethopharmacology, and you'll find plenty of examples of tribal shaman who have known things that modern chemists didn't at that time know about how plants were used as medicines, dyes, poisons, and more. Anthropologists and ethobotanists expect these shaman, these religious leaders of the tribes, to know things we don't know about the local plants, animals, wind currents, weather, and more. It would be amazing if they didn't. Pharmaceutical companies have even hired ethobotanists to find out about the drug knowledge of tribal cultures all across the world. Real, valuable, scientific knowledge buried in tons of superstitious religious garbage.
3,000 years ago, the Bible described the paths of the seas in Psalm chapter 8.
Suppose that the ancient Israelites did know something about ocean currents or some such, and let's pretend, for the sake of argument, that it wasn't known by every other culture around them. Let's pretend Venom actually found a unique factoid in the Bible. The assumption on Venom's part is that these things couldn't be known any other way but by God revealing it. And the way to know it was revealed by God is if we YouTube atheists couldn't explain how it was known. That assumption alone is bogus. Thunderboy does destroy Venom's claims that it could not be known except by revelation. He does it by showing us other ways of knowing about currents, by experience, without revelation from God. But Thunderfoot should have also challenged Venom's arguments from ignorance, his God-of-the-gaps ideas on how to tell God-revealed knowledge from knowledge gained from simple observation of the world. Because by Venom's own reasoning, he would be compelled to adopt the Ashanti religion and believe that plants, animals, and trees had souls, and that he must worship his ancestors if the Ashanti knew about the medicinal properties of any plants before Western science did, and no one could explain how they knew it. He'd have to believe the religion of almost every primitive tribe in Africa and South America that had knowledge of some medicinal plants modern science didn't know about until some ethnopharmacologist talked to the witch doctors of those tribes. What Venom does not comprehend is that it's not these little tidbits of knowledge that matter. It's the framework the knowledge exists in. Recall something else Venom said. He called these scientific factoids he thinks he found in the Bible scientific insights.
Scientific insights?
And that is dead wrong. Scientific insights are not these merely useful factoids like paths in the sea, or you should wash your hands before and after examining sick people, or how some specific plant can be made into a concoction that will expel parasitic worms from your intestines. No, a scientific insight isn't that kind of pragmatic knowledge. It's an insight into why the world works the way it does. It's about what is hidden, about what we cannot observe, not what we can. The pragmatic data points, such as which plants cure what, are just the building blocks for the creative and insightful minds that want to know how they cure. For example, when a shaman looks at a medicinal plant in his mind's eye, he might see spirits in that plant that will enact a cure if coaxed by the sacrifice of a bird or two. But when a Western ethnobotanist looks at that same plant in his mind's eye, he'll see molecular mechanisms, drugs, cures that are enacted by chemical interactions and not capricious spirits that have to be coaxed by giving them barbecued pigeons. That's framework. That's the modern scientific paradigm versus the paradigm of the tribal religion. The shaman and the ethnobotanist both see the pragmatic results, curing people, in a plant that might do it. But their explanation on how that happens are radically different. The ethnobotanist has some scientific insight. The shaman is working from a supernaturalist paradigm. The ethnobotanist is working from a naturalist paradigm. Now, Thunderfoot knows the difference between the supernatural and the naturalist paradigms, and he has hinted at this kind of scientific naturalist insight before.
But I have looked into the core of this reactor and seen beauty. Now, I know what many of you will say. It's just a bunch of metal cans and radioactive pipes with a kind of pretty glowing swimming pool. Where is the beauty? The beauty does not come from what it looks like, but from what it represents. When I look at this reactor, what I see is almost an irrelevance. In my mind's eye, I perceive the symphony of mathematics, materials, nuclear physics, thermodynamics, and engineering, spawned from the pooled knowledge of mankind.
Note that last bit again, because the boy Thunder's own words have implications he hasn't noticed.
Spawned from the pooled knowledge of mankind.
Hillary Clinton once said, "It takes a village to raise a child." Well, it takes a civilization with our governmental structures and research institutes to maintain modern science. Imagine if we could give a shaman a PhD in biochemistry, and then we put him back with his tribe where he had no access to modern lab equipment. What good would that knowledge do him there? He'd be better off seeing spirits in the plants than seeing molecules. How could that atomic knowledge serve him if he didn't have some equipment for spectroscopic analysis to identify the chemicals, or solvents and vacuum evaporators to isolate them? This same point hits the boy Thunder's example of what God should have done to gain credibility.
Why not just put an entry-level biochemistry textbook as an appendix and save billions of man-years of pointless suffering?
A biochemistry book from what era, Thunderfoot? A modern biochem book requires the existence of computers and all sorts of advanced lab equipment in order to make sense and be useful. I suggest you page through a biochem book now and take note of how much of the biochemistry is about analyzing the results of sophisticated lab equipment the ancients did not have access to. Was biochemistry even a science before there were microscopes? Modern biochemistry would be as useful to the ancient Israelites as it is to a modern witch doctor. Germs, tiny creatures, too small to be seen, smaller than fairies, would be as believable as spirits without at least a microscope to see at least the big ones. The worst thing for Thunderfoot in this regard is that this whole idea to look for science in the Bible was his idea.
All you have to do is come up with some great Nobel Prize-winning discovery between you and your God and source it to the Bible, or for that matter, any scientific discovery.
It's not what's missing from the Bible that destroys its credibility. It's what's in it. And neither Venom, nor his plagiarized sources, nor the boy Thunder himself are paying much attention to that. For example, that passage about paths in the sea, it's not about currents at all. Look at the context of Psalm 8. It's about the migratory pathways of sea creatures. It says living creatures pass along the paths of the sea. You might mistakenly think that fish, squid, and other creatures just flow with the currents. Therefore, the passage is an indirect reference to currents. Wrong. Fish only occasionally use currents, not always. Recall a salmon not just swimming upstream against the current, but swimming so fast it can leap out of the water and swim up small waterfalls. They instinctually follow an invisible path back to where they were born in order to spawn, and this can easily be observed. I'm not saying this altered interpretation destroys the Bible's credibility. That's not what this video is about. What it shatters is Venom's credibility and his sources' credibility as interpreters of the Bible. Venom doesn't take the Bible literally. He takes it hallucinogenically. He sees things that are obviously not there because someone he trusted told him they were there.